Hello, everyone. We're back after this 10 minutes break, and we will continue with the discussions. This is, I think, the most debated panel discussion of the day, since it's about the US updates coming from the dynamic trio, should I say, Bill Pascrell, Martin Lichka, and Jeremy Kleiman. Everybody's logging in from all around the US right now because most of them are attending several conferences. Bill and Martin is already here. So Bill, Martin, nice to see you again.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me again. Hope you're well.
Yeah, we're good. We're back from Prague, now preparing to go to Riga. So it's a crazy time over here. So, hi, Bill.
Hey, Zoltan.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. Well, I'm just, Martin and I just left New York City. We're on our way to the airport. So here we are in the car again, Zoltan, but I'll be where I need to be so I could go back on screen in about 5 minutes.
All right. So who would like to moderate this session, by the way?
Jeremy.
Jeremy loves moderating these sessions, but he might not have logged in just yet. So we can self-moderate unless you want to wait for Jeremy to dial in.
Right. You can self-moderate.
Right. Well, shall I take it away and just lob the first question to you, ladies and gentlemen? Very good afternoon or evening, depending on your current geography. I'm live from the Newark, or as Bill would pronounce it, with his North Jersey parlance Newark Liberty Airport, and Bill will be joining me shortly. We're actually en route to the beautiful Napa Valley to join Jeremy Kleiman there. So as you may suspect, perhaps Jeremy got a little stuck with all that lovely Californian wine, but I shall stop speculating. It's great to be here. It's great to be here with one of my best buddies, Mr. William Pascrell III. And this is the two of us, hopefully the three of us shortly, meant to be talking about the latest regulatory, RG, and other related developments here in the States, and I suppose throughout North America. So perhaps the first question to you, Bill, and I'll be ready to get one back from you once you're done with your answer. 2023, at least I very naively thought it would be, was going to be a year of iGaming, or online casino and poker, if you will. So what's happened to that? Because it's turned out not to be the case rather drastically at that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Martin. Martin, you are the quintessential, what I would call not moderator, but master of ceremonies. You're very good at what you do. And actually, you, Jeremy, and I would make up the Jersey boys because we're all there. So Zoltan, I'll be on screen in a moment. I appreciate the opportunity to be on. Jeremy, Martin, and I have done this multiple times. You know, after the debacle, Zoltan, the team, as Martin well knows, in California with a $600 million spend to barely get 18% of the vote to get sports betting across the line on the California ballot initiative, which competed with the Indian ballot initiative, which did far better. I thought the industry.
Did we lose Bill there?
iGaming is just booming and profitable and doing extraordinarily well. And everybody loves sports betting, but it's still not profitable yet. So why, after spending $600 million of industry money, we have it all doubled down? Everybody thought that there was a chance for New Hampshire and Indiana to move this year. I don't believe either will go. There's really no other low-hanging fruit prospects. It looks like this year is off, and we're going to have to all hope for next year. But the problem is, you know what, Martin, as you know this well, the industry needs to better understand this doesn't, you don't just flick the dial in 2 weeks, get a bill dropped and move it. We have to do a better job educating. There is a big distinction between sports betting and online casino and poker. Sports betting seems to be more readily acceptable. Online casino and poker is not there yet. And why the industry isn't doing more to move that, I just don't know. I think they're spending a lot of time on acquiring players, not as much time and energy on retaining players. And there's a lot of competing interests between compliance and integrity, and also retention of players and responsible gaming. So those are all the verticals that are a challenge to the industry. I'm one of the biggest advocates to bring iGaming to America. Got it done in the first state and worked in the other 6 states that have gotten it, but we're a long way from moving the dial to get another state to drop.
I can't agree more, I believe. Quintessentially, what's been missing from the iGaming, and Bell, feel free to disagree. Of course, this is meant to be debate. Let's make it a bit more controversial. But yes, I do agree. So I've already started contradicting myself. What's quintessentially what's missing from that discourse are 2 key items or elements. Strong narrative, and the industry needs to pull one together and be better prepared, to Bill's point, COMEF 2024. Because compared to sports betting, I suppose it's indeed more palatable for everybody around, especially the regulators and the legislators, because they understand it better, no doubt about that. It's linked to sports, the major leagues through their heavyweights behind all this. And it also is perceived, and to some degree it's a fallacy, but to some degree there's a good reason for it. iGaming is perceived as riskier when it comes to gambling addiction. So there's the narrative that we will need to be working on rather intensively and intently in the run-up to the next year's legislative sessions. And then secondly, we'll have to make sure, and I will give Howard Glazer full credit for coming up with this comment and argument, we do as an industry yet again, hi Bill, align ourselves much better with the legislators' interests. It's still the case, although it's coming to an end, in particular if a certain Mr. McCarthy down in DC had his way. But it's still the case that a lot of the individual US states are flush with cash on the back of the COVID-related federal aid. So that means that the usual economic argument, i.e. regulate this, you'll generate additional tax revenue, is not as powerful and even might be falling away in this particular debate. So that would be my take. Yes, well, still some chance in New Hampshire, although that would be limited to table games. Online slots are already off the table, but they will still have to shepherd it through the Senate. Perhaps the next one up, Bill, and I would love to hear your views, and I'm sure the audience will love that as well. Your views on Texas. You know, that was going to be another anticipated highlight of this year, very top of the agenda, one of the 3 sleeping giants of the US sports betting regulation, or rather non-regulation, together with California and Florida. So what's your stance on the latest developments down south in Texas?
Yeah, Martin, you're spot on. It's always a pleasure to do this with you because you have such expansive experience and background and intelligence. Enough of kind of explaining why this is so important, because I think most people understand that by now. Texas, in terms of sports betting as a next vertical or a next jurisdiction to go, is the most likely next state to drop because, of course, California can't do another ballot referendum to legalize sports betting for 2 years. And the tribes and the industry still have not had a chance to sit down and talk turkey. There's some conversations going on, but they're not moving the dial. Florida, we know, is caught up in federal lawsuit between some of the industry leaders and Hard Rock and the governor of the state of Florida and the governor. So that's not going to happen. That's litigation. That can take another year or two. Texas, I was very optimistic at the jump of the year because Jerry Jones, Mark Cuban, Tillman Fertitta, all the major sports teams who have massive political power, good experience, good relationships, seem to have moved. The lieutenant governor has moved from his no position to a more willing to talk. But there's still a lot to sort out with only a few weeks left till the session ends. And then if it doesn't go this year, to be able to put it on the ballot in Texas, we can't do it again till 2025. I was hoping that pressure, because, I mean, by now, there's not a lot of education to do if you want to self-teach. I don't think the industry's done a very good job of educating in Texas. People are more, or entities are more going in talking about competitive advantages versus a more global approach, and then compete once the regulators and legislators do their job. I am not as optimistic as I was. I gave Texas a greater than 50% chance at the jump of the year. We're winding down just a few short weeks away from the session ending. So, it's caught up in the typical back and forth. And it's in a state that has no gaming except for horse racing and the lottery. So that's always an additional challenge.
Well, I suppose, at the risk of coming across as cynical as usual, Texas reminds me of their beloved Cowboys. They can play the game, as in football, but they don't know how to win. So they're playing, but they haven't got it across the line just yet. Perhaps to tee up a few more states for you, Bill, and I'll be happy to give the audience my take on them before we move on to Kentucky and our favorite issue as of late, I-18 versus 21. Let's talk about those states that actually may go this year. Emphasis on the word may, in some cases even might. So what would be your stance on the likes of, with Georgia dead, North Carolina, Missouri, and Vermont?
Excuse me. I would say out of the three, I am most enthusiastic and optimistic about Missouri. I think it'd be great to get all three and do a trifecta, because then we'll be traipsing up against almost 30 states. Obviously the three brass wings we just talked about, Texas, Florida, and California, are big differentiators, because if you take all those states and combine the population and the per capita spend in those states, it could equal what's already across the goal line almost. So I'm most optimistic about Missouri. Then I would say Vermont, and then North Carolina. It has a lot to do with the politics, the sessions, the dialogue, but we're running out of time. The clock is clicking. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that much is clear. We're definitely up against time in all the free states. And as you've just pointed out, the plethora of issues that the individual states grapple with. I believe the key motivator and driver behind getting sportsbook across the line in Missouri is the peer pressure from Kansas that, of course, got it done last year. And contrary, may not be popular belief, but certainly Donald Trump's belief, the Kansas City Chiefs are actually based in Missouri. They're not in Kansas. So that's yet another reason why it would be so great. And as everybody knows, I don't happen to be a Chiefs fan, but it would be great to see sports betting regulated in the great state of Missouri. North Carolina, just like, with all due respect, all these places down south, we touched upon Georgia, the fact that sports betting yet again hasn't really gotten anywhere. The same goes for Alabama. So there may be a sudden curse, if you will, because they tend to get caught up in all sorts of non-gambling, not sports betting related issues that's really taking out a lot of time, energy, and oxygen out of these legislative sessions. And then finally, Vermont, my belief is that Vermont will go this year, but then they will join the ranks of the likes of New Hampshire, Connecticut, not in the terms of the regulatory setup, but with all due respect, Vermont is not the biggest or one of the biggest states across the country. So perhaps to lob one back to you, the state that has gotten it across the line. All kudos and credit to them this year is the racing state of Kentucky. So welcome, Kentucky. Great to have you on board. But there's a twist to the tale, because I believe besides, well, if Vermont regulate, they'll be 18 plus. New Hampshire's 18 plus, because that's the age for playing lottery in New Hampshire. And as I'm sure the audience will recall, and Bill, you certainly know that without a shadow of doubt, the lottery products are 18 plus, not 21 plus. So Kentucky's now joining those ranks of 18 plus. There's been a lot of debate in the industry and beyond about whether this is the right thing to do, the right approach, whether as an industry, but also whether the legislators could be putting the younger folks at risk. So what's your take? And let's also talk about some of the people who believe, erroneously for the record, that we only should be allowed to bet and gamble once we've turned 25.
Yeah, I mean, interesting state, right? It's really truly a red state, but with a blue governor. Governor Andy Bashar is a really great guy. He's up for re-election next year, and it's going to be a challenge because that state went predominantly for Trump. The bill passed HR 551 the last day of the session, so it wasn't like there was a lot of room for movement. Sometimes that pressure helps. The effective date of the bill is, I believe, June 28th, but
Correct.
The law requires people or operators to go live by December 28th to get the industry off the ground. The governor also made it clear in his bill signing that he, to the extent the industry respects Governor Bashar, and I do respect him, he would like them to launch by the NFL season. We'll see whether that is possible or not. It's a tax of about 14.25% for online and 9 3/4 for retail, but it does have the unique distinction of being an 18-year law. And so many would argue, like me perhaps, that if you can vote and you can fight in a war, but you can't drink alcohol, can you at least be able to gamble? And I don't know what the big difference is between 18 and 21, assuming, of course, we're educating people on responsible gambling.
Yeah, absolutely. To my mind, that is the key, because the 18 to 21 demographics, I take the point of some of those detractors that they may not be fully evolved, even human-wise, if you will, and they're going through education of their own. But the answer to that conundrum and challenge, in my view, is to provide that particular segment or that particular demographic with, for example, enhanced RG controls, find efficient ways of not targeting them with marketing, because clearly you can't watch. We're in the thick of the NHL and NBA playoffs, and baseball's going strong as well. Then, of course, you can't watch a game without being exposed to sports betting advertising. But let's find efficient ways of not targeting them, and so on and so forth. And actually, and yet again, I'm not trying to come across as cynical, but having 18 plus in Kentucky could actually turn out to be a very handy and useful testing ground to see how all this pans out, and whether perhaps going forward, we might or might not be in a position to lower the age of consent for gambling. One final point on that is the fact, as everybody will know by now, that actually across the border in Ontario, the minimum age is 19, and Ontario, and for good reasons, has been credited with having one of the most efficient and one of the most powerful responsible gambling programs that jurisdictions that have regulated this industry have come up. And I'm delighted to report that so far there haven't been any issues. There haven't been any major issues that would have been related to that. And perhaps that's a nice segue, Bill, if I may suggest another topic in our self-moderated session. Nice segue into talking about both responsible gambling, but even more importantly, responsible advertising. Just for the record, Bill and I rehearsed this morning at a different event, far less popular than this event. So as always, kudos and full credit to Zoltan. Congressman Tonko of our neighboring state, the Empire State of New York, a couple of months ago, he put forth a bill that is designed to introduce a blanket ban and impose it on the industry, a blanket ban on sports betting related advertising. What do you think, Bill? Is that a fool's errand, with all due respect to Congressman Tonko? Is that a fallacy, or could it somehow be efficient? You're on mute.
Sorry, I had a little background noise. I had a little background noise. Martin, if you'll permit me first, because I want to talk and answer your question about Tonka. I just want to make one last point for Zoltan and the nice audience he's assembled. He's always so successful. I enjoyed the opportunity to be in Prague with him. I was in Prague while you were in Houston, which is kind of ironic since you're Czech and I'm New Jerseyan. The final point about Kentucky, though, which I think is important, there are 9 horse tracks in Kentucky. Kentucky has a vibrant, rich horse racing industry. Horse racing in America is 18 to bet on it. Everything else is 21. And so I do agree with Martin's thesis that this could be a good opportunity to do a case study to see, in fact, because I will tell you something. I don't care what the age is, people under that age are betting, and they're betting in the black market. There's no way to track that. There's no way to monitor that. So the part of what we're trying to accomplish in America, at least, is to use the experience of other parts of the world, like Europe in particular, to do a better approach to prevention of problem gambling. 9 racetracks, each of them get up to 3 skins, so you could have as many as 27 operators. And again, we're hoping they launch by the edict of Governor Bashar by the NFL, but that's going to be a bit of a challenge, we think. In terms of Tonka's bill, Congressman Tonka, who introduced the bill a few short months ago, would ban advertising in sports. The truth of the matter is the legislature in the U.S. Congress is controlled by the Republicans, meaning that Congressman Tonka's bill, who's a Democrat from Saratoga area in New York, which is just outside Albany and where the great Saratoga racetrack is, really doesn't stand much of a chance to move. It would be unusual and unprecedented for a Democratic-sponsored bill and somebody as liberal as Tonka to have a chance to get his bill moved. I think what the bill is doing, though, hopefully, is it's allowing us to have a bigger, better conversation to educate politicians like the congressman and his colleagues on both sides of the aisle and in both houses that this would be a colossal disaster if we were to ban advertising. There are potentials for litigation based upon First Amendment free speech rights, et cetera. Those challenges failed previously by the liquor industry and the smoking industry, tobacco, because there were multi-decade bans in the U.S. on both spirits and tobacco. The spirit one has lifted, the tobacco one is starting to wane. So the most important message is the industry needs to understand that we need to use Congressman Tonka's bill as a vehicle to educate politicians across the U.S., both in regulated states and in not yet to be regulated states, that this is no way to run a railroad if you're concerned about responsible gambling. All it does is it'll allow for a greater proliferation of black market, and it will also prevent us from using the tool of advertising to educate the consumer.
Picking up where you just left it off, in my view, that is the absolutely critical point, because advertising, besides delivering commercial messages, and of course, that's what it's mainly designed to do, attracting patrons to world-class products, also has the power to convey consumer protection in this context, in particular, responsible gambling. messages. So also from the practical perspective, and you've alluded to the proliferation of the black market, just look at New York with their 51% tax and what have you. It's a key channel, it's a key conduit to convey responsible gambling messages previously, and let's not go there because we would be both sounding like broken records, but it is important. We've talked at this forum about the importance of responsible gambling champions, further education, research projects working hand in hand with sports, which brings up the next question that I would love to sound out your views on, Bill, and that relates to the other hot and controversial topic and issue as of late, and that is the industry's involvement with colleges. Let's not name PointsBet and Caesars, who happen to have commercial deals, commercial arrangements with a couple of colleges up and down, or in various states up and down the country, and they've been getting a lot of stick for that. So, of course, as part of the wider NIL debate, name, images, and liking, more and more college athletes are, for want of better expression, they've landed financially phenomenal deals and are raking in the chips because they've sold their names, not necessarily to the devil, but they sold their names to big and smaller brands out there. So finally to the question, Bell, what is your take on that whole college debate? And is there a room for collaboration commercial collaboration between the industry and colleges, including our friends at NCAA, or is this a no-go zone, a sacrosanct territory that needs to be protected chiefly because of the well-being of college athletes and college students?
Yeah, great, Martin, great questions. There's no real easy shortcut to answer this. First of all, one of the biggest mistakes made by my home state, and I tried to, as you know, I lobbied for online gaming, exchange wagering, sports betting, and now fixed odds horse racing, all Jersey being the trailblazer in it. One of the mistakes we made, and I'm talking about we as in the collaborative, was when the Senate President, former Senate President Steve Sweeney, was determined to do sports betting, but he initially wanted to ban betting on colleges, period, and then moved to just banning betting on in-state New Jersey colleges. There's a reason that's a mistake for a couple of reasons. It sends the wrong message. The way to ensure integrity, to ensure a stronger regulated market and to diminish the black market, a way to also monitor problem gambling, is to allow for those options and not ban them. So what happened? 2 years later, the state tried to lift the ban. The industry thought it would pass easily because all their intel said, oh, this is common sense. It failed miserably. It barely got 27% of the vote, no campaign. The problem with that is Jersey's looked at as a thought leader, so many other states are following that. Like we just discussed, Massachusetts can't bet on in-state colleges. What happens? Well, when Harvard or Boston College or Northeastern or any of the great universities, and that's a university state for sure, the Great Bay State, people are just going to the black market or going across state borders. How does that benefit anyone? It benefits the surrounding states. It benefits the black market. It requires citizens to conduct either illegal gambling in state or to travel to another state and have those tax dollars go elsewhere. So, we were not successful at lobbying that either in Massachusetts or New Jersey and multiple other states. Every state bans betting on high schools, and we get that. We understand that. I am more of a libertarian on this stuff and believe that the only way to provide for a better educated consumer is to make it permissible, not create so much mystique about it. I mean, we all know in America, the drinking age is 21. It wasn't done because state legislators passed it. The Senator Lautenberg, U.S. Senator Lautenberg, God rest his soul, passed a bill in the Senate and the House, and the president signed it 20 years ago, saying that if you don't pass a 21 liquor age, you will not get federal funds for transportation. That's millions and billions of dollars to states, so they all passed the 21 bill. I think that creates a bit of a comfort zone, but yet a fallacy. We know for sure every kid, young adult that goes to college at age 18, 19, 20, you think they're not going to parties, fraternity and sorority parties and drinking? Of course they are. They're doing it illegally, but at the end of the day, what's being done to prevent that? Not very much. So these are kind of false barriers we put up. And I think it's really important that we understand that there's a massive number of teenagers, hopefully in the late teens and not the early teens, who are betting in the black market because it's as simple as clicking your phone. And the black market could care less what age you are, what your affordability is, who you are, whether you're a problem gambler.
And if I may, I would stick to the theme. And although I'm not very good, as Bill knows, at tooting my own horn, but the Entain Foundation US, together with Epic Risk Management, is absolutely privileged to have a partnership with the NCA, the college sports umbrella organization, needless to say, whereby we've been given lived experience sessions to numerous students up and down the country. So the moral of this story is, in light of what Bill said, twofold. We do need to continue working hard to educate this particular demographic. They're underage, gambling-wise, but one day, inevitably, they will turn 21, and we need to provide them, furnish them with as much information as we can so that when that time comes, they make the right choice. First of all, whether to bet, gamble or not. And if they do decide to go down that route, we'll need to do everything in our power to make sure that they've got all the information they need to make the right decision, avoid slipping down the slope of gambling addiction, avoid that particular rabbit hole. I said that's twofold. So the other part relates to Bill's other point, and that is sports integrity, of course, goes well beyond colleges. So what I'm trying to say here is that the more eyes of the likes of the industry's traders, dedicated sports integrity teams, staff that are with all the individual organizations that are involved with this space, i.e. the major leagues, the NCAA, the Olympic Committee, you name them, if they do have control over those markets and can work hand in hand with betting operators, because they got access to them, including in some states, at least, college sports, the higher the chance, the higher the likelihood that any untoward behavior or occurrence is detected. And then we can raise hue and cry, those alarm bells start ringing, and action by means of intervention will be taken. Those markets are suspended, bets are voided, money is returned, and investigation is launched. Unfortunately, and exactly, that's where the interplay between black market and those restrictions comes in. Unfortunately, if some of the markets, by a regulatory or legislative decision, lurk outside of the regulated market, then nobody's keeping an eye on them, nobody's controlling them, and it could lead to much bigger issues. Perhaps in a similar vein, Bill, if I may lob it back yet again, talking about responsible gambling, responsible advertising, and talking about the leagues, our friends in the major leagues and a few TV stations, not our commonly beloved Fox News, but the likes of NBC, they threw their weight, was last week, their weight behind a set of, I believe, 6 principles related to responsible sports betting, advertising. So where would you stand on this? And then I'd be happy to give my take to the audience.
Yeah, it's It's very important, I think. I think the media and the leagues, including the NCAA, are all recognizing that we have to work far harder and not take this for granted to get ahead of the curve. So I support it 1,000%. And again, you said it best. You're not really good at tooting your own horn. You never do. But I'm proud to toot your horn for you. This is all as a result of the trailblazing work you've done with the Intain Foundation. What's beautiful about it is you started out with 6 operators. Now we're up to 9. All the top 9 are there. We're hoping we'll get the rest of them on board. And I think as a result of that, the leagues and the media groups have recognized that they need to chip in and start to better move the dial on self-regulation, because if not, there's going to be regulatory overreach.
Thanks for your kind words, as always. Of course, for obvious reasons, I'm also very supportive of the initiative the leagues launched last week. Of course, but at the same time, the good news is if you look at the principles, read through the principles, it's a short read, doesn't even need to be bedtime reading. If you have 10, 15 minutes later today, you can read through them easily. It's been widely reported on in the media, but the industry, even prior to that announcement, had already onboarded those principles. That's what we abide by. So indeed, to Bill's other point, now the challenge regarding responsible gambling is yet again really twofold, i.e., find even more efficient ways of implementing these standards. And that's a self-imposed and self-inflicted challenge for me going forward. Try to start bringing those groups that are behind the individual standards together. The league group, the group that I have the honor of having launched, the industry group, also the likes of AGA, let's bring everybody to the same table. Well, talking about responsible gambling, and to pay back all those compliments, thanks for them again, Bill, because you've been heavily involved with New Jersey's beefed up responsible gambling standards. We've had an update on that from, with all due respect, the horse's mouth this morning. So I would be grateful if you could share that with the audience. And besides that, the two of us been traveling our beloved country. We've been to the likes of Colorado, of course, upstate New York, Louisiana, Iowa, many other states, and pontificated about responsible gambling. So here comes the question again. Besides New Jersey, that clearly has triggered an avalanche of responsible gambling regulation, what are the other states that are going down this route, and what's the latest on their individual efforts? Feel free to talk about Ohio, Massachusetts as well.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Martin, with me assisting him, but Martin as the leader has been in constant contact and in numerous meetings and calls and Zooms and in-person meetings and sharing. Martin is a big part of, and it was acknowledged by the DG today in New York, of what they ultimately came up with. And because Martin is not only working on behalf of Entain, which is partnered with MGM to make BetMGM in America, but Martin has also corralled the top 9 operators to embrace this. And all of the verticals that the New Jersey DGE have done have in great part been as a result of Martin's advocacy and leadership in this space. It's designed to show the regulators we want to be held accountable, responsible. We want to self-regulate. Last thing we need is for regulatory overreach. So, now you have a yearly study that's done by Rutgers University. You have monitoring that's being done. This all launched in January of this year, where it was mandatory that all the operators had all these additional responsibilities to address RG. None of it is overly burdensome. Many operators complained about it last year. Now that it's mandatory, they have to do it. So there's no use complaining. None of it is overly burdensome. None of it is overly expensive. But, as is typical, what people like Martin and similarly situated individuals in these operating companies have to deal with is you sit at the board table, the RG person across from the commercials and rev site people, and there's not always a great elegant exchange because the rev site people, all they care about is revenue. They don't want to hear about slowing play down or blocking play or wasting a customer's, in their minds, in quotes, 3 or 4 minutes watching an advert or directing them to the 1-800 number. What we're talking about here is if you don't do those things and you allow it to be unleashed, you allow for a proliferation of problem gambling without addressing it, first preventatively and then therapeutically after you've identified the markers of harm, then you're really not creating a sustainable gaming industry. And in a few short years, we'll all be out of business. It's like anything else. We've said this before, we're one newspaper headline away in America from this whole industry getting shut and clamped down. In terms of other states, Colorado is ostensibly and has ostensibly adopted similar standards that New Jersey has. Many other states are replicating it. We were just, for example, Martin and I were just in Chicago meeting with the regulators in Illinois, and they were almost flabbergasted in a positive way that Martin would have the intelligence, the foresight, the leadership to go before them proactively. We now have a dialogue going on. Martin's exchanging what not only the DG has done, but what Martin's doing with the 12 principles. Just last week, we were in Albany, Martin and I meeting with an organization called Oasis, run by the state that treats addiction, as well as gambling and alcohol and drugs. And they were very well educated and were off the record complaining a little bit about how some of the organizations designed to advocate for problem gambling addicts were kind of misusing some facts and figures. And they were encouraging us to try to bring some more research to the table to counter those facts and figures. Here's a point. That organization told us that there's information that the number of individuals calling the 1-800 number in New York State since sports betting has gone legal and online sports betting has launched has exceedingly excelled. They recognize the reason for that is you call the 1-800 number, sometimes you're calling because you can't cash out. You want customer service. You don't know what the number really means. Everybody calling that number is not calling because they're going to have a major gambling addiction problem. Hopefully those that do that have that problem are being treated properly. Many of those are repeat calls from the same customer. Sometimes people just want to talk to somebody else for nothing other than to just have a conversation. So we have to continue to work, and Tane has spent millions of dollars doing research at Rutgers, Harvard Medical School, multi-year study, and at UNLV to gather the important data so that we can use it in a way to both help us in our technology. Tane has an ARC product that's out there that can have dozens of markers of harm there that can flag people in advance, slow them down, block them, prevent them from gambling anymore, which is all part of the conversation to solve this important problem.
Clearly, some of the record conversations are no longer so of the record, but it's of capital importance to have on the record what you just said, i.e. the truth. about the frequency and number of calls to the helpline. And that's with utter respect to the helpline, because we do need that institution. Yet again, Bill's trying to make me feel embarrassed. You may see an aura growing around my head, so I'm not turning into a saint. It's actually a window reflection here at the beautiful Newark Airport. We've got about 13 or 12 minutes left, so I would be remiss in my duties as a self-imposed moderator on this if I didn't ask you, Bill, about two final topics, if I may. Now, Zoltan will keep playing. We just love doing this. We both love the sound of our voices, but thanks for the option of exiting. We're not going to do that. We'll keep running if we may. Hopefully it's interesting for the audience. So two final topics, Bill. Canada and horse racing. Canada first, both of us. And I'm not trying to promote a rival event, because these quarterly meetups are very top and very top on my agenda and very close to my heart. But both Bill and I will be up in Toronto in about 6 weeks' time at an event that will revolve around what's been lately happening, in particular in the province of Ontario. So, Bill, what would be your take on the interplay between what's happening north of the border and the USA sports betting and online gambling ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's localized interests on both sides of the border, but I think that there's been a really nice interplay, a lot of it facilitated by you. We know that there's only the ability to bet on sport in Ontario right now, but hopefully that'll move out to the other states. I'm really thrilled to be going to Toronto with Martin in 6 weeks, predominantly to talk about responsible gaming and adverts, which are important to the conversation. They have a different age requirement in, I think it's 19, right, Martin, in Canada?
That's right, yes.
And also what I think is helpful, and Martin is far more the expert in Canada, what he's accomplished that I'm not at liberty to necessarily talk about on his behalf, but what he's accomplished up there is just quite remarkable. But I think that both jurisdictions are learning from each other, from issues involving payment processing, which Canada is now starting to sort, where there's limits on prepaid cards, to AML issues, to geolocation issues, so on and so forth. So there's a great dialogue. A good friend of Martin and mine, Paul Byrne, who's the head of the Canadian Gaming Association, has done a wonderful job of getting around the last 10 years, all of the events, not only in America, but predominantly in America, to go back and help educate the regulators and the politicians. I am hopeful that Canada will continue to have a really good, successful launch. They just celebrated their 1-year anniversary, and it's extremely successful, going well. We're not going to dictate to Canada how to conduct themselves, nor would they ever try to dictate to us. But the fact that there's a collaboration facilitated by people like Martin Litschka and his leadership is important to continuing, because if something collapses in Canada, or concomitantly, if something collapses in America, it's going to impact the cross-border and the ability to continue to grow the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why, and I've got a license from Zoltan. He's confirmed that I won't jinx anything by uttering the words SBC. That's why Paul Burns entered the SBC Hall of Fame. By the way, as a side note, Zoltan, a suggestion, if I may, you may want to entertain the idea of launching your own Hall of Fame. And of course, Bill, no doubt about that, would be your inaugural inductee. Finally, and that is Bill's primordial, out of this world expertise. And that is, let's just try to wrap it up with that, because there is a lot to say. And Bill's the man that has a lot to say about that. And that is regulation of fixed odds horse racing bets in the United States. In Bill's case, on behalf of our very good friends, bet makers, most of whom are in Australia, some of whom are in this country, and a few of them happen to be stuck in Jamaica, where they've only recently launched. So, Bill, over to you. What's the latest on that? And we can also welcome Jeremy to the conversation. Hello, Jeremy. We've had to sort of freelance and self-moderate the session, but never mind. Don't worry. Bell, over to you.
Thank you. Good to see you, Jeremy. I'm gonna speak quickly here, and then maybe Jeremy can give a few closing thoughts because I have to get to the airport where Martin is, and I've got a good 40-minute ride ahead of me. Martin, thank you for teeing up BetMakers. It's a publicly traded company out of Australia, traded on the Aussie NASDAQ. I've been working for them in government and regulatory affairs for the past 3.5 years. We launched the first state in the nation to do it in the US, fixed odds horse racing. Very simple, because a lot of people, even in the gaming industry, predominantly in the US, don't know what it is. Up until 1927 in America, we bet on horses, fixed odds, like we bet on sport. The bet you make at the time you make it in sport is the bet you get, despite the fact that something may happen to change those odds. If you bet on the Giants to beat the Eagles, and the Giants are giving 3 points, unlikely, but let me fantasize. But the odds change to where now the Giants are only giving 2 points. You bet on it for 3, that's what you get. In horse racing in America, it's predominantly a white man's sport, and it's predominantly for older people like me, not young guys like Jeremy and Martin, and my son Billy, who's 30. And so there's been no real marketing in the industry for U.S. horse racing to younger people or women or Black and brown people. We believe fixed odds has the ability to do that. It's done in just about everywhere else in the world, except in the Americas. So we're working in Canada and in parts of the Caribbean to bring content in from across the globe. Why is this important to you? At Monmouth Park Racetrack last year on May 6th, we launched fixed odds horse racing on track. On May 13th this year, we're going to be continuing to do on track, but now we're going to launch the mobile app, which is called Monmouth Bets, because BetMakers does not compete with the sports betting operators. They manage the risk, they do the odds, and they provide the content. So look out, because next 2 states to launch are Colorado, which is just about to launch. We were hoping to launch before Dan Hartman retires this weekend, but it may traipse into May. Arizona will launch soon thereafter. Everything's in place. And the Senate President of Louisiana and the Speaker have dropped bills to bring fixed odds horse racing to Louisiana. And we've talked to about 24 states now, all of which are monitoring what goes on. Final point, 20 years ago, there were 206 racetracks in America. We're down to 97. So this is a way to save horse racing, bring it to a new generation, and give operators content, particularly during the summer when there's no basketball or hockey or football, which is obviously the big predominant sports betting channels that people use. Thank you, Martin.
My pleasure. Welcome to the conversation, Jeremy.
Sorry, I'm
anything you'd like to add? We've bogged the audience through all the states that might have either miserably failed to regulate anything or have actually regulated. We talked about sports betting. We talked about responsible advertising, and Bill wrapped it up by talking about his very favorite topic, which of course is fixed odds horse racing. So at my end, the only thing I would add at this stage is to wish everybody a great NFL draft tonight, if you're interested. And my hope, perhaps foolish hope, if they play like they played last night, that by the time we're doing it again, the Bruins have been crowned the Stanley Cup champions, taking the Leafs out in the process.
It's amazing to me that you're a Bruins fan. Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
All my sins, you know most of them. You're a lawyer.
So my apologies to everyone, Zoltan in particular, and to Martin and Bill for obviously getting my time zones wrong. So I thought I was early for this panel, so my apologies. Sounds like you've hit all of the high points. I assume you ran through the good, the bad, and the ugly with U.S. states. What's happening, what's not, including some of the smaller states New Hampshire, Vermont, some of bills that have failed, some have, bills that are moving along. But no, I don't have anything else to add. I'm usually just a spectator to you, two experts on these quarterly calls.
No, we couldn't do it without you, Jeremy. And today's just been a bit rubbish because we didn't have the pleasure of your company.
Sorry, guys. Again, my apologies.
No problem at all. I believe, Zoltan, we may be done here unless there are any questions from the audience, unless you have any questions. Hopefully, this has not turned out to be too lunatic. There have been lots of elements of usual lunacy, but neither Bill nor I can help ourselves. You know how it goes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
by
there
the
are
way,
no
we had
questions from the
600
audience.
viewers.
Yeah, we had that in all the channels. And Jeremy, nice to see you again. Nice to have you here. No problem that you did not make it. There's always time for the next one.
Yeah, we'll do it on the next one. I can speak to you off. I apologize. Sorry I missed it, guys, but everyone was in, all 600 plus people were in the usual good hands with Bill and Martin. So no worries.
Yes, they were.
And we shall see you. Sorry, Zoltan. We shall see you in the Napa Valley tonight, Jeremy, if we can get there.
Looking forward
Thanks,
to it.
Zoltan. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Bill. It's been a true pleasure as always. And well, see you next time.
Thank you, guys. And yeah, Martin, is no problem mentioning other events because we like to do that. We're not like the other guys. So yeah, in 2 weeks, there's SBC North America coming up. And afterwards, there's also the Canadian Gaming Summit that they're organizing. There's also lots of other conferences, the EGR conference, which is happening, I think, today somewhere, the IMGL conference in Napa. So there are conferences everywhere. We cannot deny that. All right. So everyone, thank you for joining us again. And we'll see you in August for the next quarterly meetup. Take good care. And for everyone that's joining us in Riga in 3 weeks, we hope to see you there. We planned some karaoke night and Skyline Bar. Once again, networking runs and stuff like that. So take good care.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.